So Eoin, not Ian. So that's my mistake, and messing up on the Gaelic pronunciation. I'm going to take some grief from the family from that one. So, Eoin, thanks so much. O'Callaghan, there's no mixing up where that's from.
No, Jewish.
You're,
Hardcore Jewish.
yeah. Or as they say over there, so you're a Jew, are you? You're a Jew. That's what you love about Ireland. It's especially you talk to to your mommy or your dad.
Yeah.
It's like, my name is San Francisco Pablo.
Yep.
You're Sicilian. You're Italian, are you? Well,
You're an Italian.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks so much for joining. I said, the one thing certainly on my side of the fence, no Ireland.
No.
That's it. No World Cup then. But you're still going to watch. But let's be honest about the lads. They came up against a Danish team that has some bona fide real stars, and when they scored early, as excited as I was and my house exploded, I thought, this is going to be bad. This is just too. It was too early. I think
we don't do well when we're in front.
No,
it's never a good thing.
It needs to
for
be
an Irish
0-0
team.
in the 84th minute, and then you got a shot.
Yeah, when we get far too ahead of ourselves, it normally leads to inevitable disaster, and so it happened in our own backyard in Dublin.
But isn't it the Irish way though? You as good as things can be going, you're like, oh, the roof's going to fucking fall in.
Exactly.
It's going to be
Listen,
terrible.
the economic recession is a prime example of that. Let's buy 2 houses in Portugal. This is obviously going to go really well.
That's right.
No,
Yeah.
the economy crashes.
It's the tiger economy. I'm going, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be
we really
bad.
should have seen that one coming, to be honest.
That's right. That's right. Well, overall, the World Cup, we had James Sharman in, and we were talking to him about just all the I guess odds, because we're degenerates here. So you're not talking about footy. I mean,
I
you're
didn't
talking.
want to say it, guys. But,
You're talking to someone who, I bet on Gaelic football. I bet on hurling. I've been to the Croker. I sit there and swear with the rest of them, But when I'm looking at just the nature of football, what I thought was interesting is he made a comment about Spain. And I said, well, sometimes with some programs, it's cyclical depending on the young blood and the new blood you get. Because at one point, they were just the most brilliant footballers in any category, men or women on the whole planet. Then there was a little bit of a dropping because there kind of has to be at times. Do you think they've come full circle? Is Spain, because, look, I still wouldn't put them, I still like Germany. Germany's they have a great program. They have the players that count, because I'll go back to my argument always in your domestic professional leagues. Your stars have to be those that are nationals, and in the Bundesliga, I think you do have that, and I think they have that kind of program. I don't know if Spain's at that level yet. Still, for me,
I think it's when you kind of revolutionize things as much as Spain did for so long, it's very, very difficult to kind of keep that going. And I think what we have seen is a little bit of a flat line with them. You even look back at European Championships 2 seasons ago when things didn't go according to plan. You even go back to the last World Cup in Brazil, where it was, not to overstate it, but I mean that defeat to the Dutch was remarkable, almost inexplicable. So whether or not that they can recycle things again and come back, it's difficult. I mean, they've got some great players, but in terms of a collaborative process, do they have enough going forward? Are they ruthless enough? Yes, we know that the Spanish style of play is great, aesthetically pleasing stuff, but ultimately, do they still have that grit between their teeth that they would have shown the world a number of years ago? It's kind of up for discussion a little bit. There's certainly been a golden generation that is now on the wane. You still have the likes of Iniesta, who was there fighting tooth and nail, one last hurrah. And yeah, you could lose yourself in the romance of it. But ultimately, I think in terms of quality and in terms of what we can expect, I'm not really sure if they should be considered front runners for a tournament win.
So I sense in Group B then. I sense in Group B that is that still.
keep going.
Hey.
There we go. All right, there we go.
I sense in Group B that you still like Portugal to win the group, Spain to finish second, because it really is 2 teams and 2 non-teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I mean, what makes it obviously interesting is an intense local rivalry that those 2 countries
Absolutely.
have, and that kind of drops a little bit of a nice ingredient into the mix. I'm not sure. I've filled out my brackets, which I've now completely forgotten about. I think I said that Spain might nick first place in that group. I think Portugal, the European win, was a kind of a zenith moment for them. I think it was they were always talked about in terms of, can they do things, can they push on, can they try and eke a victory out from somewhere. The one good thing that Portugal have is essentially how they won that tournament, by being really functional. You bring it back to tournament football a lot, and people lose yourself in the mystique of teams. The most entertaining, the most exuberant. More often than not, those teams don't win. Portugal are functional. They get the job done. It may not be the greatest football that anyone's ever seen, but
because they kind of hiccup their way through World Cup. I mean, they beat Poland in penalty kicks. That
it wasn't very impressive.
No, it wasn't.
And ultimately as well, you've seen Cristiano Ronaldo, in terms of his individual performances, being up for discussion in terms of what's next for Ronaldo. He's at that point of his career now where he's not that kind of immense, glorified, strong individual. People are waiting for that little kind of decline. Can he carry Portugal again in another tournament? It's difficult. They've got a really great kid in Gonçalo Guedes, who had a great season in Spain on loan from Paris Saint-Germain. He was with Valencia. Whether or not even he gets his game is another thing.
Right.
But I mean, it's an interesting group. Certainly, those two teams should easily get into the knockout stages. And once you're in there, once you have extra time, penalty shootouts, injuries to key players, that's really when you open Pandora's box and anything can happen.
Owen, I think that when you talk about Ronaldo, it just, he has been a machine literally for years. Even though, look, we all hate him. We're all going, good looking it is. He's gambling with supermodels, and it's just,
how dare he?
And then at the moment he's going to kill you with the stature, the physical stature. I mean, the size in the box. I mean, at some point it reminds me, we were trying to think of who are like in hockey, so people would understand, and the name came out, Mario Lemieux.
Okay,
maybe not Gretzky,
right,
but certainly the next one, if you want to put, if you will, that way, and that certainly he would be in that category. To me, he almost looks like we talked about Yager, that once he gets down there with his big ass and those amazing hands,
crafty,
just trying to. I mean, what he maneuvers offensively in a very small space because he's bigger than you.
Yeah,
he at times is still able to do it. Not the dominance that he had, because you're not good forever. I mean, Tiger Woods wasn't good forever, but he still is someone that you're going to have to contend with. But it's like LeBron and friends.
Yeah.
Maybe you need better friends, or I just don't think. I mean, to me, Portugal is at the. If we're talking about winning the whole thing, then I just don't think that's a conversation.
Yeah, and I think as well you could argue the same thing. It's funny though, in the conversation between Ronaldo and Messi, when you look at it from an international perspective, both of them kind of are in a similar situation. They have an expectation and anticipation and a burden of responsibility always on their shoulders. Obviously, 2 years ago with European Championship win, Ronaldo has kind of ticked that box, whereas with Messi, it remains this intense frustration, this process that he can't crack. And, again, we're coming into a World Cup with question marks about Argentina and about the one thing that Messi needs to glorify his name, if it even needs more glorification, is some sort of international victory with his country. And similarly to Ronaldo, you have to look at the Argentina situation and go, does he have enough around him? Because it can't just be always on this one guy, and that's the massive $1 million question for Argentina. Is there enough elsewhere on that pitch?
Are they even good enough? Are they even the number one team in the group? Because there's a lot of people, especially on our betting site, that Croatia's starting to gain momentum betting wise to topple that group. I'm still an Argentina backer when it comes to it, but I think it's Croatia, Argentina in whatever direction you want to go, 1-2.
Yeah,
with all due respect to Nigeria and what was it, Peru? Was it Iceland? That's right, Iceland in that group.
I think it's weird because it's not the first time that someone's mentioned Croatia to me in the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit in terms of where did the love for Croatia come
I'm
from?
Slovenian, so I don't want Croatia to win.
Look, and we have a ton. Let's not. Hey, we got a ton of Croatians who followed us for years.
Yeah,
including names like they'll use names like Split or Kung Fu Zombie.
Listen, we can all lose. I fell in love with the Croatian team in the mid-90s. I was a kid growing up in Cork in Ireland, and they got to the quarterfinals of European Championship in 1996, and then they finished third at the World Cup in 1998. So
that's home for you?
Cork? Cork is my home. Yeah.
Like Cork City or
Cork City? Yeah, Roy Keane, home of Roy Keane and Dennis Irwin, all the greats.
Oh
yeah.
Speaking of butcher shops, I don't know why everything's connected to meat, and guess what? It's always lamb. If I go in there and I see the lamb being chopped up, I took my niece over there and we were sort of traveling around, and we were just
market. Maybe did you go to the
right
markets?
downtown,
right in the middle,
in the middle, and they were lopping off heads, and I took my niece in there. I'm like, God, I'm so hungry.
It's
I'm so
a
hungry.
welcoming sort of thing for all of the tourists.
Pork, there's innards, there's ears, and there's feet. I'm like, starving.
Yeah.
I'm starving
Yeah,
when I see it. It's
exactly.
beautiful. Yes.
But yes, I fell in love with the Croatian team in the mid-90s. So in terms of another kind of romantic bet, you always like to see Croatia do well because it conjures up those memories of growing up and watching great players like Prosnecki and Davor Suker and Zvonimir Boban and all those guys. Whether or not they have it this time around, it's kind of baffling, like what you're saying about bets being laid on them.
Yes.
There's obviously something in the waters that people are looking into, gazing into their.
Yeah, it's called desperation, though.
I'm not like World Cup normally.
I think he's agreeing with you.
Yeah, I think World Cup normally brings about tradition as your kind of key point, and Argentina is a traditional powerhouse, and it would be also it wouldn't be worth going home for those Argentinian players if they don't finish top of their group.
Well, how do you feel if you're Colombia?
Oh,
Don't even get back on that plane. I mean, I think you take up Russian asylum or something.
Yeah, well, Russia being such a welcoming country for any asylum seekers traditionally, that would work a treat, I'm sure, for those Colombians who wish to stay on in that country after the World Cup. But Colombia is another interesting one. Again, you talk about your high-profile, glittering individual magic, and James Rodriguez obviously is their key man, their talisman. But again, you have to go back to 4 years ago and whether or not the kind of surprise element has now been parked a little bit.
Yeah.
They still rely massively on Falcao up front, who's kind of rediscovered his way in France. It was a good move for him after a really torrid time in England. But again, it's weird. This World Cup is a bit of a head scratcher in terms of, one key question a lot of people ask is there a dark horse in the tournament?
Yes.
And, for me, it's very, very difficult. You look at the strength of the core teams that always stand out, and you're trying to find a way that's a kind of a lesser light will actually get a chance to shine, and it seems to be quite difficult trying to figure out, okay, how can this team properly progress even maybe to a semi-finals. So there's not even really one dark horse team. I mean, potentially, and this is going to probably piss off a lot of people listening, are we at a stage where England are a dark horse?
I think how can you not agree with that statement? You take a look at where they are, and if I'm saying, well, I think I see them as semifinalists. How do you see them as semifinal? And look, if they made it into, well, I would call it, the 8.
Yeah.
If they made it into that, I think actually English people would be like, well, that's all right. I mean,
I think that Gareth Southgate has done something really, really special with this. I mean, expectations have really never been as low, which is great. It's relatively calm. There's no off-field chaos.
Yeah,
There's no
that's right,
pantomime. There's
right.
no theatrics that normally go hand in hand with when England go to any major tournament. Southgate was a pretty unassuming player, and he's kind of the same way as a coach. It's pretty quiet. Everything's under control, and I think that once you get the right sort of chemistry, that has a massive effect on a core group of guys who are together for a couple of weeks, and you get maybe one or two good results. Sometimes you're looking at each other thinking, wow, maybe there's something in this.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, England are on the same side of the draw as Germany, so if Belgium top England's group and England finish second, it's more than likely a quarter-final against Germany. That's if they get past Colombia. So that's how the kind of draw would play out. But again, a round of 16, England against Colombia, given a little bit of good chemistry and good vibes in that English camp, I'd almost tip England to win that game and go into a quarterfinal clash with Germany.
We should tell everybody, too, there is some movement this weekend on the World Cup outrights. Brazil has now overtaken Germany as the betting public favorite to win the tournament, paying a $4.76. Germany comes in at number 2, France at number 3, Spain at number 4, rounding out the top 5, Argentina paying a 9-1 to win the event. So that's a little bit of a change. Germany had been at that number 1 spot since they put down the numbers about a year ago. So we're on the week of, and there's been a change at top. Not much, but enough to
It's not like the
report.
Brazilians to be confident about themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
They're also a very public country where your average
in terms of
soccer
betting,
fan-
you're saying, yes.
as far
A public team.
Okay, for example, in the NFL, if you don't watch the game, you know that the New England Patriots are very
They have a
public.
fighting chance.
Yeah, exactly. And people will sit there and go, "Oh, my dad was a Cowboys fan."
Yeah, people will bet the Cowboys
are-
whether they're good enough or not.
Exactly,
Public team.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not putting Brazil in the Cowboys realm of things, but I am putting them closer to the Patriots one. Like they they should finish top 4, and I think anything outside of the top 4 would probably be a poor showing for that country.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. You go back 4 years ago when they hosted this tournament, and the pressure was so intense, particularly for someone like Neymar. I think that they can probably look forward to this World Cup in a completely different way. The pressure is less; they're away from that intensity. I'm surprised that there's such a level of confidence in this Brazilian team. I know that a lot of people would say, look at their qualification campaign, it was so special. I really don't care about qualifiers when it comes to a World Cup, because a World Cup is such a unique experience. Qualification is built over 18 months. Games come every once in a while, and it's very, very playing percentages. You pick up a point on an away trip, you come back home, you get a win under your belt, blah, blah, blah. A World Cup is 3 group games. If you don't come out of the gates quickly, you're going home. If you finish second in your group as a high-profile team, suddenly you're looking at a round of 16 clash against another decent side you could be playing. So it's very, very different. The confidence in terms of the Brazilian team, obviously you look at Neymar, but you also look at their special trick, which is a rare breed. A coach in charge of the team who lots of people like, which is very, very strange for Brazil. Tite has kind of waved the magic wand a little bit, and everyone's fallen under his spell. I think definitely Brazil should look at a Final Four place. And you're right, if it's anything less than that, again, you come back to seeking asylum in Russia, as what you need to do. But in terms of them getting over that finish line, I think I have them facing France in a semi-final, and I would look at France doing them that semi-final.
Oh God, France! Come on, Eoin, and someone named Eoin O'Callaghan. You can't be liking those French bastards.
Well,
think of Thierry Henry, what he did. Cheating bastard.
Listen, us Irish never like to hold a grudge.
No, of course not.
We tend to park things and get over things pretty quickly. My favorite player growing up was Eric Cantona, so I've always been a little bit on the side of enjoying French football. But in terms, we also faced France at the European Championships 2 years ago when they beat us. When they actually, it was a tough game, and France showed a little bit of strength of character, particularly Griezmann, who I fancy to actually win the Golden Boot at this tournament.
Yeah, he's a remarkable player. Whether he's playing for his league team or as an international, he really dangerous.
Yeah, and I think as well that France, the one thing, whenever you lose a final like they did in the Euros against Portugal, do you have it within yourself to come back again, and are you fired up and motivated enough to really go hard for another tournament?
See, because you talked about chemistry with the English. We know that the French are more than capable of having meltdowns.
Correct. Now, I think that was a particular generation of senior players, veteran players, that ego was a massive part of it. Not to say that a group of these French players don't have big egos. That goes as part and parcel of any elite sports team. But I do like the look of this team. I think that Kylian Mbappe is an absolutely magical player. He possesses so much talent, and if they can step up on what they showed us at the Euros in 2016, I think it could be strong. Paul Pogba has a lot of questions to answer. He had a very, very mixed season for Manchester United. This is a player who, essentially the whole world should love and adore, but we're not quite there yet.
They don't. They don't.
Yeah. So it's there's a little bit of pressure on him to kind of in front of the world's audience to show what he can do properly again, because he hasn't done that at Manchester United. So I just like it. I like it as a group. I think France Germany may be a good bet as a final. That would probably mean that 2 South American teams are beaten in the semi-finals, with Brazil on one side and Argentina on the other. That's if all of those boxes get ticked perfectly along the way, which of course they won't, because it's a World Cup and we'll always have at least one or two surprises.
Should mention Antoine Griezmann?
Antoine Griezmann?
Yes, yeah. He's the third favorite to win the Golden Shoe, top goal scorer at 12-1. Right
big
now,
number.
Neymar is number 1, Messi's number 2, so we got you down for 12-1. Also, you mentioned in passing that I heard you talk about England and how they would, in your mind, would play Colombia. So you got Colombia to win Group H.
Yes.
Over Poland, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
How close is that?
I don't see Poland. There's a couple of European teams who fall into a similar category. I mean, I've seen other people talk about Denmark and Switzerland. Again, you come back to functionality. Poland have Lewandowski, but they don't really have much else. Let's think about it. If Lewandowski pulls up with a hamstring injury in the first game, what do Poland do then? What's the plan B? They don't really have enough stuff around Lewandowski to kind of get up and running. And again, obviously, given the fact that we're Irish and I get to see a lot of European teams a lot. Poland have never really impressed me too much.
Scored a lot in qualifying, though, but also let in a lot in qualifying.
Yeah, and
too,
again,
right?
Qualifiers can really just. They won't score a lot in a group game.
If you're playing San Marino and the Isle of whatever.
Yeah, and you don't. I mean, it's a very rare thing for a team to go into a group stage and obliterate the opposition. Normally, what you do is, it's like any kind of. It's like the NBA. It's like, right, we're going to put so and so in for a shift. If we're home and dry, we're going to pull him out for the last quarter or whatever it is, and we can bench him and let's concentrate on the knockout stages. So, I mean, even in the case of something like top goal scorer, a lot of people are talking in the build-up to this tournament about, such and such can probably get as many as 4 or 5 in the group stages, which never happens. It's like you don't get one-sided results normally in group stage play. It's a very, very rare thing. So, for instance, in terms of a top goal scorer, normally it's you pick up 2 or 3 goals in the group stages, you pick up another 2 or 3 goals in the knockout rounds, and so therefore usually the top goal scorer is from one of the teams who finish in the final 4
because they played the most games.
They play the most games, so it does come back to kind of percentage, picking up basically a goal a game. I mean, I think there's one exception, Oleg Zelenko for the Russians in 1984, where I think he scored 5 against Cameroon in the group stage, and he still finished joint top with Stoichkov of Bulgaria because Bulgaria went long in the competition. Russia got knocked out in the group stages, so Zelenko scores 5 goals in the group stage. You go, this is amazing. He still has to share the prize with Stoichkov, who finishes with 6 as well. So that's the World Cup is an odd thing, but usually you have a pattern that it kind of sticks to more often than not.
Now, some of the countries that aren't there, we mentioned Ireland, obviously. Italy, another big public team in terms of love, not there. And then the Netherlands again, and I think you look at their domestic league, and you get some real powerhouses and Ajax and PSV, and yet they became dysfunctional. It seems like 15, 20 years when they were like rock stars. Like it was. We mentioned U2. It was like U2 coming on the field. As the blonde dreadlocks and it's the sunglasses, and they were always the sexy pick to do something, and it seemed to really backfire on them. It didn't. In terms of the chemistry and what they wanted, they just couldn't actually finish. I think is really what the problem is. But I would assume, and the argument could be made, if I'm watching Serie A, the biggest stars in some of those teams, I mean, one is called Inter. I mean, there are, it's like, that's why the hardcore Italian fans are going to like, the Juventus of the world. They're going to like the really Italian-y, if I can put it that way. What are these teams like a Netherlands, like an Italy? What do they need to do in terms of their national program to get back to that level, or is it that eroding? Like, look, would it be fun to see Scotland in a World Cup? But that is a tough push. And aside from those that follow it casually, you would know Celtic and Ranger. But after that, I mean, it's if you're talking world stage, it becomes difficult to find players at that level.
Yeah, I think that in terms of Italy and Netherlands. The immediate comparison that you can make is with the United States, where there's the United States have failed to make their first World Cup in 30 years, and it's like, well, this is chaos. We need a national investigation into why this was a failure. Well, if you got a draw against Trinidad and Tobago in your final game, you would have qualified. If you scored one more goal, you would be there. Let's put this in context. Similarly, when you look at the Italians and the Netherlands not being in a World Cup, you kind of have to look at it in isolation. Like, how remarkable or inexplicable is it for both of those teams to miss out? Particularly the same edition, that's pretty inexplicable. Is it going to ever happen again? Yeah, I mean, the thing is that in terms of both those countries, there's an immense, hardcore, intense football community. So everyone knows that this is not going to happen again, because it cannot be allowed to happen again. Germany had something similar where they redesigned their entire structure and their entire program after a miserable European Championship experience. Years ago, they came back in 2006 when they hosted the tournament and they finished third, and then it kind of kicked things together again, and they kind of restitched how their football structure was in the country, and they reinvented themselves. But it took an unmitigated disaster for them to go back to ripping up the plan and starting all over again. And sometimes you just need that. I think the Netherlands is probably, I've just finished a magazine essay about the Dutch and their level of psychosis, and the Dutch were always believers in that we may not win anything, but we can give the world something beautiful. So if you think back to Johan Cruyff, the Dutch didn't win in 1974; they were beaten by Germany in the final. But the Dutch would argue that it doesn't mean much because of what we gave the world generally.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you mentioned what the Dutch have done. When I look at the World Cup that was in Brazil, so
Yeah.
when and you just knew that they said to themselves, well, we're not better than the other team, so if we're going to win, we're going to slow this thing down. We're going to make it dirty. We'll grab people. We'll challenge them every tackle that we can make. We're going to try to make, and we will. And it almost worked.
Yeah.
I mean, they almost did it. That was Robin's team.
Yeah.
And it's just funny the strategies you see within World Cups where for North Americans, it's still as popular as the sport is, and we see what TFC's done. Obviously in Vancouver, MLS has been huge, but still, for the most part, when we're going to gather in a bar, there's still a lot of people who go, "Who's that then now? What are they any good? Where are they from? Are they supposed to win?" There still is a little mystery to it.
Yeah.
No, that's grossly changing pretty fast because it is the world. Well, it's always been the world's most popular sport, but there is an education to it. Do you find that in North America where you're having more? Because I'll tell you, 2001, if you had asked me of any of the big leagues and those teams, you're getting a blank look back.
Yeah.
You're getting a blank stare because I wouldn't have known until I gambled once on it. And then I'm like, oh, no, so Southampton's playing who? Like I just all of a sudden, I bet on
Portsmouth aren't good.
I bet on Scunthorpe. I wish I could say that's not true. It's true. I bet on everything.
Listen, we all have our problems, Mike. We all have our issues. Who am I to condemn you for having your own? But no, I think that access is always a big thing. If you put games on TV and give people the opportunity to sit down and watch them, people will. A modern day sports fan doesn't just watch NFL or NBA; they watch 4 or 5 different sports.
I think that's 100% correct.
Constantly.
Yes.
And even it throughout a season, interest levels peak and then drop to a certain level, but it's like a seesaw essentially. But that's and soccer is now part of that conversation. People can sit down on a Tuesday or Wednesday and watch a Champions League game, and that's their little bit of food for that week in terms of football, and they get their fix. So I think definitely from a North American perspective, it's improved rapidly. I mean, sometimes you still are a little bit taken aback by what people ask you, because you almost lose yourself in how popular sports become, and then you have a conversation with someone and it kind of levels off.
Right, you realize
more.
really yes.
You realize, oh, okay, yeah, we still need to kind of work on this a little bit more. But you're right, Major League Soccer in terms of Canada has really, and Canada's always had a really great. I mean, you go back historically, not to bore listeners with it, but football's always been tied to a lot of communities around this country, and just due to various factors, it's kind of disappeared into the margins a little bit and into the sidelines. But it's certainly more educated. It's certainly more opinionated. And I think that in terms of North American, market, you normally take your cues from the US, and the US have been blessed with, success in inverted commas in terms of football relatively recently. And once they take the lead and you have your big markets like your ESPN and Fox kind of covering the game to a certain level, well, then that kind of has a drip feed effect, and everyone else becomes kind of neutral fans. So again, you bring it back to a local interest, and then that feeds, everyone becomes an expert. It's like, case in point, the US women's soccer team, the reason that blew up was because they were successful. There were parades in their honor. They were celebrated. Suddenly they were on the covers of magazines. If they finished third at tournaments, that's probably not going to be happening. But they were champions. It's something to celebrate. So obviously it comes back to good news stories as well. And that if you've got if you've got a drum to beat, you beat it and people get behind it. And I think that's going to be what's happening with TFC. You even think back a couple of seasons ago when they were miserable. People couldn't even hand off their season tickets for free to their friends.
Red fans were they were a tortured group.
Oh, completely.
Sean Cullen, the great comedian, always would come on with us, and he would come on to say how much it's like a relationship. And I go, if it was your girlfriend, what would you say? I hate you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just constant disappointment, and no matter what day of the week it was constant disappointment. Yeah. But now there's a feel-good factor. You're getting to MLS Cup. You're getting a taste of silverware. People want more of it, and it's infectious.
Well, and you can also see there's some fatigue here with they've played a lot of football.
And you know what? That's cyclical as well.
Sure it is.
I mean, it's to be expected. I mean, this is the second year. Arguably they should have 2 MLS Cups in their back pocket,
Yes.
and they don't. So
Yes.
they've had to push hard for 2 back-to-back campaigns, which also is not easy.
That's hard to do.
They've had CONCACAF Champions League commitments as well. It's been a long road for them, and obviously you're going to get a bit of fatigue. And it's the odd, strange oddity, which is MLS. I mean, as bad as you can be in a regular season, you can still make the playoffs. I mean, it's kind of and people will go, with this, you may not be playing at home, and this game. It doesn't matter. The cream always rises to the top when it comes to the postseason, and TFC will be thereabouts this season as well. It'll might take them a little bit more time.
Yeah, exactly. Big win against Philadelphia on the weekend too to get them a little bit closer to that line. So your resume right now: Irish Examiner, Guardian Sport, Indie Sports, 8x8 magazine. You also do a podcast with Bobby McMahon, an old friend of mine from Winnipeg.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah,
I lived in Winnipeg for 2.5 years.
I lived there for 30-something years.
Okay, you've got the edge on me there slightly. Yeah. But as an Irish person in Winnipeg, that was a unique thing.
I was going to say you got lost.
I got very lost there for a while. That was my last weekend. That ended up being 2.5 years. No, I was working on a TV show with Bobby at the time, so that's what landed
Fox
me in
Sports
Winnipeg.
report.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely cool. So what's the latest for you outside of juggling a lot of different dates? I guess reports for different agencies and stuff like that. What keeps you busy?
Yeah, that basically is it. I mean, it's kind of a 7-day-a-week thing where you are juggling time zones. You're juggling different publications.
Because most of this is overseas too.
Yeah, and it's also juggling, trying to look 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ahead and trying to plan, which is not easy, but it's enjoyable. All of those guys that I work with are a really, really talented bunch, and it's always a pleasure. It's always just great to do what you love. And people are always kind of reminding you when you reach a certain age that, you've managed to make a career out of this, and you go, I guess it is a career. I guess that's what you can call it. But yeah, every 4 years World Cup is usually a bit nuts. In terms of various commitments and various people wanting you to come in and bore listeners with your thoughts on football. So thanks to you guys for having me in and doing this again.
No, this is awesome.
Well, then we're going to have to do hurling. And
introducing Canadians to hurling. Well,
should be, and you know what? For what Canadians like, here's what they understand. They understand sticks. They get sticks.
Yes.
They get goalies.
Yes.
And they like when it gets a little edgy. Now, as I tell people, if you really want to see what it looks like, even though there are officials, what a sport looks like when officials seem like they don't have rules, then you watch Gaelic football. Because Gaelic football is the craziest thing to try to. You have to see it. You can't explain it.
Yeah, I've shown a couple of mates hurling. There's actually close connections between hockey and hurling in terms of the history behind it. Irish and Scottish immigrants, so shinny, like what you guys refer to as pick-up hockey.
Yeah.
Like shinty is a sport in Scotland played with curved sticks, like a hockey stick, and shinty is very, very close to hurling. It's a Celtic sport with a shared kind of ideology. They're all stick sports played with a small ball, effectively, and then just nature takes its course, and Canadians have to figure out how to do it outside in certain weather conditions. So that's what I'm saying here is the Irish invented hockey. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Canada. But I would urge everyone to open up YouTube and type in Cork against Kilkenny or something, and you will see. What we always laugh at in Ireland when we watch hockey is you're like, oh, this is great. Look at all of the protection those players have on the ice. watch hurling, and you'll see the lack of protection there.
The stick, and then in what we would call like a hockey helmet with the screen.
And
now
they
they do.
And the helmet has only been a recent thing.
Yes.
Just, for a long time, you didn't have to wear the helmet,
No.
even if you're a goalkeeper.
That's right.
So yeah, and you can throw the ball up and smack it in the air, so it's not just off the ground. So think of the speed that ball is traveling, and you're a goalkeeper with a little stick trying to stop it. And all of these guys are amateurs. They don't get paid for what they do, so they come into your school on a Monday and they teach you geography, or they're your accountant on a Tuesday, and they're probably having the battle scars, probably coming in with half an arm or whatever after playing in front of 80,000 people on a Sunday. So it's a special sport.
It is a special sport, and the best way I can equate it, when you start talking about the GAA, so the Gaelic Athletic Association, it's all amateurs, and therefore. So my people get ridiculed. So my people are originally from Cavan, so you can imagine how that goes.
Again, Mike, you have your problems.
Yeah,
we won't hold it.
Culchies, we're Culchies. I get it. And so, but sometimes, like if you're in Dublin, there's a little bit of that it's more of a culture sport sometimes, in and around.
That's because Dublin were terrible at hurling for so long.
Then they got good.
Jealous.
Then they had one team, and all of a sudden
because
it was
they're the richest county in the country.
That's right.
They get so much more money.
It's not fair. So I go to this match, and it's Limerick, and I think Clare. I think it was Limerick and Clare.
Yeah.
So I go into the bookmakers. Of course I do, and I make an accumulator.
Oh, brilliant!
I'll make accumulator, and so I go in. Just it's early in the morning, so I'm reeking of.
Non-alcoholic beverages.
Bulmers or whatever, because that's a breakfast drink, I believe. Having a little cider.
Yeah.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And so I'm in there with everybody else doing the same thing. So he goes, "So what are you looking for? What are you going to do there?" So I started going through. I'll take the. This is what my accumulator looked like. I'll take the New England Patriots. Jesus. So we start going through it, and it goes all over. And then I said, and I go, Limerick and Clare. What do you fucking take? Well, of course, all of a sudden. So they said, you got to be taking Limerick on this one. Take Limerick.
Interesting.
And this is one of the years where, strange enough, Kilkenny, who won for, they must be hated. They're the
they're the Yankees.
They're the Yankees of that league.
Yeah.
So I go in and I go down. The big avenue that's closed off. Why am I drawing a blank?
In Drumcondra?
No, in
Griffith
Dublin, where all the stores are.
Grafton Street?
Oh, so I go to Grafton Street, and I go in and I get these little perfectly green shoes to match the green of Limerick. So I go in there. I'm sitting at the one end in Crow Park, and it's just mad. It's crazy. It's all so much fun, and the relationship that a lot of the people have with, if you're from Limerick or Clare or Cork, it's like I always explain, it's the same enthusiasm that people show here for junior hockey.
Okay.
So they don't call you by the last name.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fucking Jimmy or it's Liam or it's Seamus or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we go in, I'm sitting in the Limerick section. It's just fabulous. I go with me dad, who's like 94.
Amazing.
He goes, I used to work here. And they're like, when they,
really?
Yeah. Was Cromwell bombing the city? And so we're sitting there, and of course it's like, come on, Jimmy, you can do it. You're a great player.
Yeah.
Well, then they're shite. They can't hit anything. Like they're throwing the ball and they're not getting anywhere. And then the crowd starts to turn sour.
Yeah.
So it goes from, Jimmy, I know your dad's a beautiful, beautiful day, but I mean, you fucking days of shite. Come on. And then 80,000 leave, and Limerick loses, and then both fans almost arm in arm, and we're stopping off all the pubs all the way home.
Oh yeah.
Singing songs and singing. I thought, to at least once in your life, you talk about bucket lists. People would say, well, how could it possibly be hurling or because the fun and the nature of Ireland at heart is you don't know me, I don't know you. It doesn't matter what jersey we have on. It doesn't. It's not like firms or they're not getting ugly. It's you're having some laughs. You're having some drinks on the way home, and it was beautiful. It was brilliant.
With GAA. I love that this conversation has gone from Antoine Griezmann winning the Golden Boot at the World Cup to now talking about Limerick GAA, which is remarkable. I'm very proud of this fact, but
not with this guy sitting here. This is where it was destined to go.
But it does refer to your identity. Like you said, it's not a franchise. These players aren't playing for franchises. They're not owned by a billionaire white guy in a blazer sitting in a Mac mansion somewhere. It's this is your county. This is where you were brought up, and it's where you're from. So the guys who you're watching on the pitch, you probably went to school with them, or at least you went to school with their brother or their sister or their aunt. There's a family connection, and so often, there are brothers and sisters in terms of camogie, the female version of hurling,
right?
Where you or ladies football, or whatever it is, where brothers and sisters are part of the same team. They play literally shoulder to shoulder with each other, and that's the kind of impact that the GAA has in Ireland. It's really our thing, and it's our DNA. DNA, and it's who we are effectively.
Before we go,
Yes.
CPL.
Oh yes.
Canadian Premier League. We've talked to people, including Scott Mitchell.
Brilliant.
David has come in. We've talked
Right.
to him, and it seems very exciting. They mentioned Winnipeg the other day.
Valor FC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So we just talked about the importance of domestic leagues in making your national product better. What's your thinking on the CPL?
I would relate it instantly back to Ireland again, because in the League of Ireland is our domestic league. It's been semi-pro, but then a lot of teams have actually taken on full-time professionalism, and it's gone through its rough patches, economic turbulence. Some clubs in smaller pockets of the country have struggled to get attendance figures up and to pay players, and it's been difficult. But the League of Ireland in the last couple of seasons, for certain teams and certain players, have had a massive impact on the Republic of Ireland team. Now you have League of Ireland players who play in Cork or Dublin to a really high professional standard. They get a decent wage. They're well taken care of. They have experienced England. They've gone over to England as a teenager.
Sure.
They may not have it's a big goldfish bowl in England. There's no rhyme or reason why a 17 or 18-year-old kid doesn't make it at one club but does make it at another club. But they come back to Ireland, renew their love and passion for this game, and show everyone else just how good they are. And that League of Ireland has developed its product. But those players have been playing for League of Ireland teams and getting on the international scene. So Martin O'Neill, as a coach, has come to League of Ireland games, watched these players up close, and said, you know what, I think you actually do have something that you can provide to us or Roy Keane. And these League of Ireland players have been called up to senior Irish squads. That's the dream for the CPL.
Sure.
Players that may not have got an opportunity in Major League Soccer, they've been spat out, and they've been in the kind of undercurrent of North American soccer, be it the USL or be it the NASL when it was still around. They're looking to showcase their talent.
Well, and all those NCAA players, big time in Canada, that again fall into that category.
Completely, and also as well, the massive thing about CPL is there are hardcore football communities right across this country. It's not just metropolitan areas like your Torontos, your Montreals, your Vancouvers. There is a great and all of these launch videos, like in Winnipeg, like in Edmonton, like in York FC. All of it is a genuine outpouring of emotion. People are like, this is something for us now. This is something that we can get behind. Now, I mean, you have to back it up in terms of your longevity. We've had a Canadian professional league before. It lasted for 5 years and it folded in 1992. But to go back to what we were talking about earlier, there is a wider education in terms of soccer now, in terms of North America. Before, it was very, very tough for soccer to muscle their way into a market. Now, there's local soccer on your doorstep. There is no excuses anymore. And also, here's the interesting thing about local soccer and professional soccer in an environment, in a local neighbourhood or community. You look at the problems that the English Premier League have right now. The product is watered down. The games that you watch, usually on a weekend, if it's not top six, it's dirge, it's garbage. It's really, really difficult to actually watch it. In England now, you've got 3 different broadcasters who are fighting for rights. If you want to watch every Premier League game in a season, you now have to look at paying 3 different subscribers for access to those games. So now people are actually in England getting a little bit fed up of being asked so much to watch these games. You look at a local market and you look at what that will do for your small teams, your small clubs in your local areas. That will feed down from those supporters who get fed up with that glittering, high-profile, glitzy stuff. The CPL is real, it's authentic, and it's on your doorstep. So here's something that you can contribute to and you can actually have an impact on. These players, you can go in there by paying a nominal enough fee to go in and support this local game. It's a really, really great national story. And I think it's long overdue. Canada really needed its own professional league. And I think it's coast to coast. It's no longer, you look at Major League Soccer as a prime example. If I live in Winnipeg, I'm supposed to root for Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal in terms of, and be proud of their success. If they do succeed, that's strange. It's you wouldn't get it in any other sport. Yes. And I think it's important that you widen up the opportunity for this country for people to get behind local teams. And all of those release videos, the launch videos of crests, identity, DNA, all of those key attributes that we talked about in relation to other clubs, really, really important. And it's a kind of a reminder to these places that there is a soccer history here. It's just for so long been buried. And it's really, really important step. And I think that if you look at the Irish model, you give players the right platform and the right opportunity, there will come opportunities to come into John Herdman's senior side and impress at that level. It will take time. You know, no one's going to just click their fingers and the Canadian Premier League is one of the top 10 leagues in the world. It'll take time, it'll take patience, and it'll also take a sustained effort from people not to give up on it. That's a massive thing. We can all turn around in 3 years and go, I'm not really sure about this anymore. You have to stick with it. I mean, it's like anything that a domestic league is something that's built over hundreds of years. You know, you look and that's the exciting thing. You could be at the first starting point of something that you look back on in 200 years is going from strength to strength. In terms of getting in on ground zero, what an amazing thing to do. And in terms for all those clubs to be able to tell people, I'm member number 1 of this club.
Yeah.
What a great thing. Or I'm member number 10. And you can the biggest thing for CPL, and I've talked to the guys in there already about this, getting kids to go into school on a Monday morning wearing the shirt that they're local
wearing a
team.
York 9.
Wearing a York, because the other thing is that once one kid sees a jersey like that in the classroom, everyone else will want to know where he got it from and what's it for, and it becomes that shiny new object. And for a while, certainly, the CPL will be the shiny new object. And what we have to do is we have to try and harness that and try and push it and promote it as best we can.
Oh, great stuff! Really brilliant here
Well said,
today,
well said,
Eoin. Eoin.
Well,
you know what I just almost said? Eamon Coughlin.
I've been likened to many people in my life. Eamon Coughlin's the greatest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'll tell you a story about Winnipeg before we go.
Yes, sir.
And in terms of how bizarre my name is, I went into pick up some dry cleaning in Winnipeg, the regular local dry cleaners, and
Likely Perts.
it was. I used to live on Grant Avenue.
Okay,
that's where I was in Winnipeg, and went
right
over.
by my buddy Russ Hobson. He lives off of Grant.
good old Russ.
Yeah, we used to
amazing.
co-anchor Global Sports with Joe Pascucci. Sure, I'm sure you
listen,
know.
all these glory local celebs, really.
That's it, very much so.
But go hand the ticket to the girl behind the desk, and she has that look of absolute panic as she types the number into the database, because now my name has flashed up on her computer. And she has that moment where she thinks, should I even try and pronounce this? And there's that moment, you can see the fear and panic in her face. And I know what's about to happen. And fairness to her, she does go for it. She's like, you know what? Let's not hold back on this. Let's go for it. And what she does is she just pronounces every individual letter of my name.
Eoin.
She just says... Eoin? And there's the implied question mark at the end, as in, I know this is not right. And then she doubled down on it by just saying, Collagen for my surname, which I thought was, if you're going to get it wrong, you might as well go all in. So Eoin Collagen is my Winnipeg alias.
Yeah, well,
really.
hey, in all fairness, as much as I love all languages, so I'm going, okay, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to learn me Gaelic. You know, so I know if you're in the South, you know, you can see signs that are in Gaelic. In Dublin, when you were younger, certainly in the day, they'd have these little trips that they would take, and they'd stay in the South, and a lot of times, and so they'd learn like a farmhouse, and these people would be speaking. So I looked at it, the first page. And I look at relatives, and I said, "What the fuck is this supposed to be?" He goes, "That's how it is."
Yeah.
It is just so. The only thing I took with me, and of course that is Pogue Mahone. I mean,
Pogue Mahone and probably Sláinte is another one that everyone knows.
But after that, even oh my God! So from Cavan and Navan, no matter what the language is, you would assume there would be somewhat of a rhyme or similarity. And one is like, and the other one's like it's
normally how Irish works is that it's normally about what the location looks like. So Cavan, if Cavan is like the land of the flat, and like that's what the Gaelic would be, and Navan would be, river mountain, and and you have the Gaelic translation of it. Normally anything with Canuck in it or Quill, like Kilkenny, Quill is the Irish for wood, so Kill is where that part of the word.
Oh, it's really because I think Dublin isn't the Bay of the Dark Ones or something like that.
Balia, and Balia is town. So if we're now giving people linguistic lessons. This is great. But for anyone who's been in Ireland and visited Bally something, so Ballygarvey or Ballybunion, Bally is Balia, so Bally means town. So that's the Gaelic.
Look, the only Irish you really need to know is just watch Mrs. Brown's Boys. You watch Mrs. Brown's
Please
Boys.
don't. Please
That's
don't.
the only.
Watch Father Ted instead.
Yeah, our Father Ted. Yeah, watch that. It was just great having you here today.
Oh,
that
thanks,
was just
Jake, for having me.
wonderful.
No, it was a pleasure.
We'll have to keep in touch because
Yeah,
that was just
absolutely.
great. Thanks so much for today.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.